Correct, last word.
Gentleman's recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. American Life Science is a partnership between the public sector, which funds basic research, and the private sector, which develops drugs. On the public side, I'm proud to have worked with many of my colleagues here to increase the annual budget for basic research funding at the National Institutes of Health from around $29 billion when I joined Congress in 2013 to $43 billion today. But as important as that research is, we rely on the private sector to use private capital to create applications for that science. And that makes sense for taxpayers because drug development is full of risk, and most drug candidates that receive investment never come to market. The median investment required to bring a new drug to market is about $1 billion, and according to CBO, accounting for failures, cost to bring just one drug or treatment to market could be as high as $2 billion. Those private investments are substantial. In 2018 alone, according to Research America, private investment funded $102 billion of US drug development, dwarfing the $40 billion budget, the NIH, plus anything we're talking about for ARPA-H, which I support, and without risk to the American taxpayer. Now, what would be the effect on future investment of the price-setting mechanisms in the bill before us today? Well, let's listen to the investors themselves. In a September 8th letter to the President and congressional leadership, over 400 individual biotechnology investors, not big biopharmaceutical companies, by the way, gave us testimony as follows, and I'll quote it. Quote, Congress is considering allowing the government to dictate the price that a company may charge for a novel drug with the threat of ruining the company financially with a 95% tax should the company refuse to accept the government's price. Such draconian measures would immediately halt private funding of drug discovery and development. As an industry, we would no longer be able to infer what insurance plans might value and pay tomorrow from what they value and pay today, which is the premise of a market economy. Unpredictable government-dictated prices would supplant the current market-based framework that inspires biomedical R&D investment. The investors among us would have to shift our investments toward areas still governed by markets, such as technology and consumer goods. Those companies with drug candidates in development would fail to raise more capital, making it pointless for them to spend existing dollars on ongoing research. The loss of hundreds of thousands of well-paying jobs would be swift, although it may take longer for the public to sense the loss of future treatments and cures. Some may think NIH funding will be sufficient to fund continued R&D. The NIH is a crucial funder of basic research that provides the ideas for what kinds of drugs might be possible. Translating those ideas into actual medicines is almost entirely driven by the private sector and makes all that basic research worth funding in the first place. End quote. Now, it's not just investors who have raised the alarms about lost cures, it's also patient advocates from the Alliance for Aging Research, the American Autoimmune-Related Diseases Association, the American Behçet's Disease Association, the HIV and Hepatitis Policy Institute, and I personally heard opposition to the HR3 funding mechanisms or taxing mechanisms from Lupus Foundation of Southern California, Epilepsy Foundation of San Diego County, Alzheimer's Association, and Autism Society San Diego. Another problem with the proposed approach is access. Other countries save money on medicines by severely limiting who can have access to drugs in order to cut down on costs. That's why the National Council on Disabilities opposes the use of international reference pricing in HR3. And of course, the economic impact. As we discussed in this very markup, reshoring parts of our supply chain back to the US, we should avoid scaring off existing jobs in American science. And for me, probably not surprisingly, it hits home. According to the San Diego Economic Development Corporation, the life sciences industry directly employs about 27,000 San Diegans across nearly 1,000 firms, and about 2/3 of those jobs are in research and development. We want API to be made here, we've said that today. By the same token, we want the talent and know-how that has developed therapies and cures in the amazing COVID-19 vaccines right here in America to stay right here in America. People are demanding lower out-of-pocket costs for their medicines. We have promised lower out-of-pocket costs, and we should deliver. I have no disagreement with any of my colleagues on that. We have to lower out-of-pocket costs for patients and preserve the American ecosystem of private investment innovation. And that's the proposal I'll advance today. If we only lower the cost of existing drugs and cut the legs out from the private sector ecosystem that develops new medicines, we will be having hearings in the coming years in this committee about how to induce this brainpower research and development back to our shores. This bill can be fixed. It needs to be. I hope my colleagues on both sides will consider a different approach, one that protects both our patients and our future. Mr. Chairman, before I yield back, I ask unanimous consent to add to the record a letter of September 8th from approximately 400 investors led by Peter Kolchinsky to President Biden and congressional leadership. Your staff got that yesterday, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Peters. If we could get a copy of that, or we already have it, I don't know,